I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now I'd like to introduce the Reverend Richard Morris for the opening prayer.
I was told that I could also make a few appropriate remarks. So I hope my remarks will be appropriate and brief. It's a pleasure this morning to work with Mr. Doherty, who's familiar with me. He has known me and some of my activities at VA here in Lebanon and some of my political involvement. So he gently reminded me this morning that this is not a political meeting. So I'm abiding by that. But still, I can't help noticing something that I didn't know until a day or so ago, that Herbert was named after a president, Herbert Hoover Braden. Not only that, one of his sons takes the first name of Lincoln. So that'll be all I'll say about politics. But where Herb is concerned personally, I do want to share a couple things. I think I'm trying to think how many years ago I first knew him, but it's too far back, I can't. But it's been a while. And I owe a lot to Pat and Herb, both, because they were very kind to me at times when I needed it a lot. They gave me opportunities that I would not have had otherwise. And I will not go into that any further, except to say that I'm very thankful. Thankful for them both. Now, I didn't know exactly how to address Herb here this morning. Should I call him Herb? Should I call him Mr. Braden? So I decided Herbert's gonna be for me, because we were friends. And when Herb became your friend, he took you and your friendship for what it was intended to be. He didn't ask you if you were a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. He shook your hand and said, "Happy to know you." Herb had so many accomplishments that I couldn't begin to name them all in the 5 minutes that I've been allotted to speak here this morning. But I will say this: he was a great man and a great friend. And that's what means the most to me, and the part that I'll always remember. Let us pray. Lord our God, you have given to us life, and you have called us from life in this world at the time that you deem appropriate. You have promised that we will have a home in heaven one day if we know you. And you have said to us words which we need so much in this desperate hour we're going through in this land. Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. Thank you, O Lord, for taking Herb into your eternal arms now and giving him rest from his labors and the joy of the presence of our Lord forever and ever. Amen.
Okay, I'm up. It's my turn. Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for coming out. Your presence is very important to us and means a lot to myself and the family. And my name is Lincoln Braden, and just my dad used to, when I was a kid, introduce me as Lincoln Braden, heir to the Braden millions. He used to do that to all of his friends. It embarrassed me a lot, you know, and it didn't matter to him. So, but I'm going to get back to the Braden millions a little later on. This is the participative part of the talk, so feel free to participate. Raise your hand first, though. I have some trivia. Herb graduated from Bradford High School in 1949. Does anybody know the mascot of Bradford High School?
Owls.
The Owls. There are lucrative prizes attached to this that you'll get later on. So, okay. All right. Now, there's one other school in Pennsylvania that has the owl as a mascot. Does anybody know?
Temple University.
High school. Jack. Ben Salem. Only 2 schools. So, all of us are owls. My dad was an owl. Just wanted to let you know that. Okay, so my father, as we all knew it, spoke the King's English. At times, we weren't sure which king it was. So there was a time when, back when I was about 7 years old or so, I remember we used to have one of those phones in the kitchen that had like a 20-foot cord, and it would all tangled up all the time. You had to like pull it apart, and he would march back and forth, jingling his change, talking to his friends, and sometimes he said things that you wouldn't want a 7-year-old to hear. So, but sometimes that comes back and bites you too. Well, we were at Sunday school one time, and the Sunday school was basically this one room, and it was divided up with curtains, so you could kind of hear what's going on in the other group. My group was the young group, and I was next to the adult group, which my mom and dad were in. So the minister, who was our teacher, asked me, he says, "Well, Lincoln, what'd you think about the sermon?" I said, "Well, you said a lot of curse words." I'm sorry, Mr. Morris, you may want to close your ears during this one. He said, "You said a lot of curse words." He says, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, you said Jesus Christ." Well, Lincoln, that's not a curse word, but sometimes people take the Lord's name in vain. Now, my parents are on the other side of this curtain, all these other adults, kind of trying to crawl underneath the table. And I felt bad that I said this to the minister. I said, "Well, you know, my dad used to do that." I said, "But he's worked on it, and now all he says is piss on it." A lot of you guys don't know this, but I bear the scars of child abandonment. And I want to tell you about why I feel that way. Well, one day we had to go out and go to Kentucky Fried Chicken. So myself and my two friends, and one of the friends was here earlier, so I got the rest of the story, which was good because I had a hole in the story. And we went to Kentucky Fried Chicken, and we went in this, Ford LTD station wagon with it was maybe a Country Squire. It has, has the decal, the wood on the side of it, So we rode out there, and I got in. It was really crowded, so I said to my friends, I said, hey, I'm going to go to the bathroom. I'll be right back. I come back, and I couldn't find my dad, couldn't find my friends. So where are they? So I go outside, and I see the Country Squire going out on the driveway. I start running after it. Go to Street Road, there they're going. So I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and they never came back. So my friend, I just talked to him. I said, well, what was going on in the car? He says, Lincoln, we were telling him the whole way up the road that you left them behind, and he just didn't do anything. Okay. So they got back home. Mom says, where's Lincoln? Oh, well, he's playing a joke. He's hiding in the car. He thought I was like in the wheel well. Those little wheel wells are in the back you put the luggage in? He thought I was hiding in there. Well, finally, my mom convinced him to drive back and try to find me. So he found me, and I was probably about 3.5 miles into a 5-mile trip. And I got back in the car, and I spoke a little of the King's English also. And I got back to the house, and I think when I got there, I threw a chicken wing at him. So, anyway, but my father he always had hunches. He was always right a lot of times, and even when there was something unpopular going on. So one day, it was in the fall of 1983, we convinced him to come out and see his alma mater play Penn State. And this was a warm-up game, for Penn State. And we just won the national championship in '82. I mean, we were tough. So Friday night, I sit there and I said to my dad, I said, they're calling for a shutout. He said, nah, Cincinnati let them score in the second half. Met with a lot of laughter, right? Well, the score at halftime was 10-0 Cincinnati. The final score was 17-3 Cincinnati. So, anyways, he's walking back to our house, and Joe Paterno never used to drive to the stadium. He would walk back and forth, and he was actually jogging by, and my dad was there, and he was wearing his Cincinnati stuff. He had a red and black shaker, and he says, nice game, Joe. He says, no comment. He just ran by. So, at any rate, I don't know if you guys got over there to look, but there was a bunch of pictures there at airports, okay? And there's a Braden tradition is if you're flying somewhere, you're picking somebody up, you're getting off the plane, you're picking somebody up, you wear an outfit. So, for example, I might wear something like this.
Mohawk.
Okay? Coming off the airplane. Now, my dad, one day we were in Cleveland, and he was out to visit me, and we went to pick up Betsy and her family at the airport. And my dad was dressed in a black leather jacket. He had dark sunglasses on, and he had a hat, like a little Jeff hat kind of thing. It was leather, and it had a gray ponytail on the back of it. And it looked real. I mean, he looked like it was his hair. So we're down to baggage claim, and I don't know how it actually started, but one of the policemen just didn't like him. And looked at him and says, he kept coming over, and they're staring at each other, and what you looking at? I don't know, what are you looking at? And then, anyways, we start walking out. I was like, come on, let's go. So we're walking down, and they're next to each other, and they're saying stuff like, the cop says, I don't think you're funny. My dad says, well, I don't think you're funny either. And they keep walking, and they get to finally, my dad goes, are you going to arrest me? Are you going to arrest me? And they kept walking. Finally, he went away. So that was That was an interesting time. Proud day, right? So anyways, he, let's say here. Yeah, so he kept his wit about him. Those of you that lived out here understood that. But even, I'll tell you a story, you know, dementia's tough. I mean, it takes away a piece of you slowly. But the one thing it didn't take away from my father was his wit and his humor. And in fact, probably about, I don't know, maybe only 4 months ago or 3 months ago, my mom and my father were at a drugstore. And they're coming through. My dad, you know, for the last few years, just always had a suit on, suit and tie, always wanted to look good. And he had his, I don't know if you saw the hat over this, his 90 never looked so good. And he's wearing that. He gets to the checkout, this young woman cashier looks at him, says, you know, I really like when a man gets dressed up. It looks good. And he said, he paused, he says, what are you doing tonight? So anyways, brings us back to the Braden millions, okay? Are the millions, were they about money? Or were they about something else? Were they about the million smiles, stories, and laughs that we had with them? And if I've inherited that, and that's the Braden millions, I feel like a very wealthy man. Thank you. Hang on, is there an accountant in the room? Abby, you're an accountant, right? Okay, look, this whole inheritance thing, we gotta talk afterwards. I don't wanna pay any taxes, none, okay? Thank you.
Hi.
All right, I'd rather laugh than cry. Okay. I'm Laura. I'm the eldest of the four. What? Is that better? Yeah. All right. That's a tough act to follow, Link. So anyway, just when I was thinking about Herbie, the thing that came to me was how much he tried to give us exposure to experiences, new experiences. You know, from the time we were little, we went to different places, different vacations, things like that. I did write some notes because I'm not as good as Link. Some of the experiences we had early on, I remember, is getting strapped into an airplane seat next to Betsy, and Herb takes off, you know. Back in the day, that was exciting, that was new, that was fresh. So it was something that we experienced that maybe a lot of other people didn't experience. The airplane was a Aranca chief. We have pictures of that over there. We lived on Lake Ontario. These are just some of the experiences that I've had that I've paid forward with my kids too. When we lived on Lake Ontario, we were allowed to go down and play in the water, and then Herbie would teach us how to skip rocks, you know, making the ripples and things like that. And I know I've taught the kids how to skip rocks too. So just the experiences that I've had are like what I would, as I remember from this book, the butterfly effect, that the flapping of the wings of the butterfly can affect the next person, the next person, the next person, and the next person. So I think Herbie was able to affect a lot of flapping of wings. The one thing he did like to instill in us was a love of music. One of the very first songs that I recall him teaching me, and Pat won't let me sing the whole thing. I'm not even going to sing it, but it was an Irish ballad. Anybody remember the words? About a maid I'll sing a song, sing rickety tickety tin. About a maid I'll sing a song, Cut it? Okay. I'll take a cue from my mom. But he taught me that when I was, what, about knee-high to a grasshopper, 4 or 5 years old, and I sang it for my grandmother at one point. And that was interesting. But see, Herbie had that, like, little edge to kind of push the envelope here and there. And people are laughing, I bet you know, right? So the rickety-tickety-tin. I do remember family gatherings with the Marvins where we would play Annie Over, and there was probably a little cheating going on, but that was fun. Part of the good game.
Or the fireworks.
What's that?
The fireworks.
We're getting to that
Oh,
part.
sorry.
I was looking for you guys. I was like, oh, I got somebody that knows that story just besides us, right? And that was one of them, the 4th of July fireworks. Well, I was allowed to bring fireworks to this family gathering. And it was everybody, all the kids, the Marvins and the Robinsons and us and who else? Mealy's. That's right, we were at their house. I brought the firecrackers. Well, we thought it was a good idea to put the firecrackers in the cow poop and blow them up. So it was kind of typical of our family to get into little bits of trouble like that. So anyway, we did blow some fireworks up, and that was all fun and games. And then we went down to the cows, and the boys, somebody's brother, the Robinsons and the brothers, yeah, they thought it was a good idea. They took the firecrackers, lit them up, and threw them at the herd. Well, yeah, it started a little bit of a ruckus, and cows came stampeding, and I took the kids and herded them over onto the little path, little bridge. And Pat and Herb came running. Oh my God, my mom scaled the fence, jumped over, and trying to save the kids. But that's the kind of thing we grew up with. That's kind of fun we like to have. Just one other thing too, with 4th of July, I remember that Herbie and Pat and we started bicycle parades in Bensalem. And then that carried on for a number of years, where we would decorate the bikes. Betsy was Betsy Ross one year, and we hauled her around, and it was a lot of fun. We started a lot of things. If I think back too, because Pat and Herb had at one point thought they were going to move to Council Rock School District, and because the houses weren't going to be available right away, they decided to move to Bensalem. So I wonder, you know, with that butterfly effect, if they'd have moved to Council Rock instead of Bensalem, how things might have been different and played out. I think the Bensalem thing was fun. That's what I think. Herbie taught me how to, after we go to Sunday school, we'd all get in the car and go to the mall. The mall was closed back then on Sundays, but he would say, okay, you drive. I was like 13. So that was, and the kids in the back seat would go, let Laura drive, let Laura drive. We would go, anyway, so that was fun. And he taught me how to change oil in the car. He sent all 4 of us kids to college. Pat and Herb did. They thought that was very important. The sailboat, I think about that. A lot of experiences on the sailboat. If it wasn't for the sailboat, I might not have had these 2 kids here, right? Because I met Rick down there, right? So I had other 2 kids or something. But I'm glad for the ones I have. Anyway, we went on tons of vacations. We went to Florida a lot, Fort Myers, St. Augustine, the boat, the sea camper, the Dutch craft. We went and saw the Apollo, the Skylab launch. So a lot of experiences. Pat and Herb made sure that we had a lot of experiences, a lot of lessons. French horn. Anybody? He wanted somebody to play the French horn. Damn it. It was got to be somebody. So I had to play for a little bit. I think I dropped it after about a month. Then Lincoln was next in line, and he had to play the French horn for about 3 months. He didn't like it either. So we had to wait another generation, and Maddie played the French horn. And she played it well, and she played it in the band. Well, you were the only, anyway, so somebody played the French horn. So we instilled a lot of music in us. We always remember at home, and even this week, it's been like, you can hear the piano playing in the back. It was always there. Herbie always played the piano, so it was a lot of fun. He took us on trips to New York City. He took us to the Statue of Liberty. We went to the Empire State Building, and we went to the World Trade Center. We took the kids to the World Trade Center a year ahead of 9/11. So went to the top. So music, house was always full of music. Maddie, anyway, yeah. One thing I do remember that was pretty important to me. There was a situation one time at Kurt's school where at the elementary school, the teacher that was in charge of his class was not really fit for teaching. And that's putting it mildly. I decided to go in at the urging of some of the friends and found that this to be true. And so I took notes, and I'm looking at this and I thought, this isn't right. I asked Herbie, what do I do? He says, this is what you do. You get every one of the school board members' names and you write them a registered letter and you tell them that you're coming with your issues and you're gonna want answers. And it worked, it worked. I do remember that being kind of a turning point, you know, as far as being able to know that you can create a change. If you really want to, you got to look at it square and confront it. So that was probably one of the ones that came to mind. So I do want to thank everybody for coming, and Herbie, I know you'd rather be up here with us joking around, but Godspeed, and write if you find work.
Hi everyone, I'm Elizabeth or Betsy Braden. Thank you all for coming out to celebrate the life of my father, Herbert Braden. I know some of you came from far away, like me. Like Herb would say, I flew in from Tampa and boy, are my arms tired. This was one of my father's favorite things to say when we flew out to see each other. He was always joking, wearing mohawks at the airport, things like that, and always saying the same old worn out sayings. Joking as well as music was important to him. He was always entertaining. He was joking and singing because it helped him cope. He had a very tough life. He grew up in poverty, but boy did he succeed. He started working as soon as he could by picking up bowling pins at the bowling alley. He supported his parents until they died, as well as our family of 6, and putting 4 kids through college. Later in life, through 6 years of debilitating dementia, he still played the piano 2 hours a day, which was amazing. He taught us all to work hard. He was an engineer and designed and sold pollution control systems for power plants throughout the world. When he was home, he loved to make up songs, especially about the dog. The dog is the pooch, oh yeah, oh yeah, Kiddly, and he loved his cat. His nicknames for us in chronological order are Audie, Pacey, Egan's, and Voodoo. As Laura was talking about, a great family memory was schlepping to Florida in the family truckster. Our vehicle was a 1973 Ford Country Squire station wagon. We sang songs all the way there and all the way back. 100 bottles of beer on the wall, 100 bottles of beer. And this is what we did before Apple machines. He jumped out of the car once and picked a cotton plant for a souvenir in South Carolina, and then he picked some Spanish moss, which was full of bugs. we had lizards running around the car, and we stopped at Cape Kennedy, and we got Apollo rockets. Model Apollo rockets, and we got to see skyrockets lift off. And Herb could fix everything and he never threw anything out. Our appliances and cars were very old. For example, once he fixed his recliner chair. And at the time I was at a shop class and I made a candy dish. And to show his appreciation for this candy dish, he would sit in his favorite recliner chair and clip his toenails in it. So one day he's fixing the chair and he came up from the basement and and Link said, "What's in your hair?" And he found a toenail. So we don't call it a recliner chair, we always call it the toenail chair. He loved sports. He liked the Phillies, the Eagles, Sixers. He went to Cincinnati, so he liked the Bearcats, and he loved to watch their football and basketball team. When we were kids, he and 2 other dads would load up a station wagon with 12 kids, and we would head to the Phillies game at the vet. On Louisville Slugger Day, when they gave everybody a bat, we were told to hold up our bats. And unfortunately, some kid 20 rows up dropped a bat and hit him right on the head. So I don't think they have bat day anymore. Plus, giving a bunch of bats in Philadelphia is not a good idea. One of the families that went to the baseball games with me were the Horans. Julie's here today. Her mother, Helen, thought Herb was very smart and said, "Herb's always right." And then he would say, "I am always right, except the time I thought I was wrong." If we were mad and we ran away from home, he would yell, "Right if you find work." Just like Laura said. Going back to his early childhood, he was 10 when World War II started. He joined the Army when he was 19, and he was a veteran of the Korean War. I lived in France, so when he came to visit, I said, "Please come visit." And where do you want to go? He wanted to go to the beaches of Normandy. That was a dream come through. So we drove from Paris to Normandy, but all I remember was the Parisian roundabouts. There was like 9 lanes merging into one, and Herb yelling at me, "Are you going crazy?" And speaking of yelling, Herb liked to yell a lot. I think that's why he bought a boat and became a sailor. There's lots of yelling for sure. Sailing with him required patience and earplugs, especially when we ran aground or ran into a dock. For some reason, he liked to yell, "Christ Almighty," and "Jesus H. Christ" on a handcart, even though he hasn't been to church in years. When I lived in Japan, I took him to Tokyo and Kyoto. His favorite story to tell was when we were on a train. He was admiring the beer dispensers on the train platforms at each stop. "Wow, that's interesting. You could just run out there and get a beer." And a man overheard, they're very friendly in Japan, and he said, "Oh, do you want to go get a beer? Let's just jump off." And Pat's like, No, don't jump off, because how are we going to meet up? There was no cell phones back then. So they jumped off the train, they got a beer real quick, the door shut, he had to run to the other car and just jump back on. But that was like his favorite story of Japan. I don't know why. And then, so Herb was an engineer until he was like 64. And then he became a loan officer, and I helped train him. I was the boss lady. And we worked together for 10 years at a mortgage company. Every day we talked on the phone. We were very close then. At one point, he had the lowest rates in Pennsylvania on bankrate.com, and his phone rang off the hook. His motto was, "Give him a ton and let him run." He loved his grandchildren and liked to sing them songs and tell them stories. And Pat and Herb had a hot tub out on the deck of their house in, is that Mount Gretna? What was the town? Laurelwood Drive. And there were a lot of Spanish moths, and their deck was just full of Spanish moss poop. And he took the kids into the hot tub, and unfortunately there was bug poop in there too. And instead of going, "Ew, ew," he's like, "Let's sing a song." Swimming in the black bug poop. So to make a, you always try to make a bad situation better by singing. And in conclusion, if you look up Herbert Hoover Braden on the Google machine, you will find a good son, a good father, grandfather, husband, engineer, politician, loan officer, handyman, pilot, pianist, and veteran. He would have liked to talk to you today, joke around, play the piano, and thank you for coming out. I love him very much, and I miss him. Thank you for coming.
Hi, everybody. I'm Emily, the youngest daughter, and Herb loved to write. He was a very gifted writer. He liked poetry, and he would express a lot of that with singing songs and just making stuff up as we went along. So I wanted to focus on the writing aspect of Herb Braden. And I picked out a couple of well-known chosen pieces, particularly for this event, that he always loved. And the first one I will just go into to say, when we lived in Lambertville, there was a cat that was going up and down the street quite a bit. And when the parents were around, Betsy and I would just let the cat in. I think I bought cat food, and the cat just kind of came in. And there was one Friday where Pat and Herbert were going to sailing on the Chesapeake, and if that cat's here when I get back, I'm gonna throw it off the balcony. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, have fun, yeah, see ya. So that was that. Then Tabby officially moved in, and it did not take long for that bond. So the first piece that I'd like to read is a memo, done in memo form, from the president of Hunterton Power, which is also what Herb created, was Hunterton Power. And it's a memo to everybody who was living in the house, okay? So, to, and this is all bold capitals, all right? So, to all residents of this here house, from the chief resident, president of Hunter Power and Development. Subject, feline diet. First paragraph. It has been brought to my attention that through deceit, lack of attention to detail, compassion, lack of resolve, and general giving in to beggars, that the cat, also known as Tabby, Oliver, Tabitha, Tabio, Tabby, fat cat, bad breathy sin, pissed on the girly sin, Luke Skywalker, beggar cat, kiddly cat, and the effin' cat, has been fed multiple meals on several occasions. In addition, the cat captures any and all occasions when someone is in the proximity of the refrigerator or the can opener to get additional scraps of food. Now, it is apparent that all residents of this here house like this cat, maybe not Bertha, but the rest. This cat takes advantage of this affection to create sympathy for faked hunger. The cat does this by saying meow. People who believe this cat are making a mistake. Okay, all caps bold. Tabby's veracity is seriously lacking. Tabby will fake hunger even though she has just been fed. Do not be misled by a lying pussy cat. From here on in, I must insist that all feedings be logged. He actually had a flow chart, like an Excel sheet, right? Okay. I suggest that those caught failing to follow this order will be fed half a can of cat food, disguised to look like egg foo young. There will be no exceptions to this here rule. Signed, Herbert H. Braden, cat nutritionist. Okay, so the next one really doesn't, well, I guess I should give a little bit of an introduction. So every year, as like my brother and my sister said, like we would go out to visit the relatives in Western Pennsylvania every Memorial Day weekend mostly, and we pile into the station wagon and drive out there. And there were two occasions, twice, where we all went to this kind of potluck gathering, and like I said, we all got sick hours later. Okay, so you had a lot of very miserable sick people. Okay, so one year when we came back, I was sick, I was one of those, and I asked my father, when I had to return to school, I had to give an excuse. I had to hand in a note to say why I had to miss school that day. So I asked my father to write an excuse for me, and he said I'd be happy to do that. So this poem is titled, Please Excuse Emily May Braden. And I handed this in, by the way. Sickness struck Emily May Braden this week. Tuesday, May 27th, is the day of which we speak. Starting Monday morn at 2:45, she suffered multiple symptoms, the like of which you will see would flatten a strong athlete such as you and me. There was stomach discomfort, abdominal pain, there was dizziness and headaches and diaphragm strain. From puking up food at a rate, we explained, that alarmed her parents and established a drain on her vitality, created a desire to remain in Edmonton, PA, hardly a happy domain. We headed home in spite of it on Monday morn for Ben Salem, PA, with a load of very forlorn, of 7, count them, sick people in a car much too small to carry 7 with active puking and stopping on call. For 350 miles, the troubled auto load wound in the hot summer air with 6 souls not sound. Emily continued to exhibit her symptoms of nausea, stomach cramps, and bowel afflictions. It may have been food poisoning, the meatballs perhaps, or liverwurst, or dumplings, or maybe the schnapps. It may be the ham, a Hawaiian dish, was the guilty agent, but there was no fish. Later events may have forced this conclusion. It was really a virus, a bug with such fusion, that it traveled from body to body in only one day. For it hit all, even those who used good sense, to avoid the food, ham, salads, and mince. Please excuse Emily for the time she was sick. She's glad to get well and will do all the work missed quick. Thank you a lot for not grading this poem. My words are not great, but I really enjoy them. And I handed this in, and the woman looked at me and said, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yeah, that's my dad." Okay, so I have one more poem to read. I think before I go into that, I'm just going to add a couple stories, getting back to what Laura said about Herbie giving us wonderful experiences. He was involved in Ben Salem politics for many, many years, and when we went to Lambertville, not so much, but there was a big issue going on with the pump. There was going to be a huge pump that was going to be built to take water out of the Delaware River to create development going upstream. Anyway, it was a big, big, big thing. So of course Herb got involved in that. So it was an environmental movement, and the movement was known as Dump the Pump. Okay, so I was in college one day, and Herbie said to me, "Do you want to go to a protest?" I said, "Sure." I said, "What is it?" "It's a Dump the Pump protest up the street against the river." I'm like, "Oh, okay, let's go." So I went with him, and it was really my first experience, getting back to the serious part of it, of like real true activism, because they were picketing in circles, and the big, big machinery was there, and there were people standing in front, just saying, "You're not going to do this." And all walks of life, everybody was there, and there's Herb with his sign, when he was walking around, and I was with him, and it was awesome. And I would never think I would ever say these two names in one sentence, but actually it made complete sense, of Herb Braden and Abby Hoffman, because they both were involved with the Dump the Pump movement, and they actually would chat it up for like an hour on end, I was told. So it was very interesting to see different walks of life coming together, and it was very profound to me. It was a very, very powerful experience, taking that forward, how to stand up for what you believe is true. So the last poem that I'm going to read, actually Barry Jarrett, Lonnie's mother, found this for me, and I'd like to read this poem. It's called I Should Go by Joyce Greenfell. If I should go before the rest of you, break not a flower, nor inscribe a stone, nor when I'm gone speak in the Sunday voice, but be the usual selves that I have known. Weep if you must, parting is hell, but life goes on, so sing as well.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Emily's husband, and I met her 31 years ago and have stayed with Emily anyway. So, anyone who knew Herb Braden knew a man of great equanimity, sensitivity, discretion, a man pleasant in demeanor and consummate patience. However, that must have been someone else because it certainly wasn't Herb. We took Herb and Pat to Hancock Shaker Village, the historic home of the Shakers, who founded a religion where you're not allowed to have sex, and you could only join the religion by converting to it, which proved apparently a hard sell because they no longer exist. So we were on the tour, walking through the abode of the Shakers, to the main house, and the tour guide noted that the men slept on the right side of the building, and the women slept on the left side. And I said, I bet there was a lot of sneaking around at night, knowing what I know about such arrangements. The tour guide took great offense and said, sir, these were deeply principled people. And I said, well, I do know what goes on when people take such vows very often. And Herb said, Lonnie, have you ever seen a picture of a Shaker woman? He said, believe me, there was no sneaking around. So I run a medical practice, and I keep 3 treatment rooms going at the same time. And I came out one day to check my email, and Herb had taken upon himself to forward me a letter to the editor that he had just sent to the editor of the Philadelphia Inquirer, advocating for the impeachment of President Bill Clinton. And I looked at it, read it, took 30 seconds because I'm a professional writer, jotted off a letter to the editor stating a contrary opinion, and forgot about it. And the next morning, Herb takes a shower, rushes outside to get the newspaper, scrolls, opens to the editorial page to find a letter to the editor from his son-in-law in Massachusetts. And he calls me on the phone and he says, apparently they'll print any idiot on the page. And I said, Herb, not just any idiot. So I never met anyone in my life who was so full of it. That I liked so well. And I'll miss him.
Well, we're so glad that we know her, and we also know Pat. And this is, we both came up with memories, and we know we're a time limit, so don't be afraid that this is full of lots of information. Do you want to go first, Dale?
Oh, you go ahead.
Okay, my memories are, Herb was always jabbing me. I grew up with a lot of brothers, and maybe that's why. And I said, Herb, I'm promising you that I'm going to say something at your memorial service. So here you go. And I said to my husband, Dale, I said, Dale, which memory should I say? And he says, just one, Cindy. But when I was sitting here listening to these cars, memories of 13 kids in a car or something, I'm from a family of 11. We used to stuff the whole family in a car too with no seatbelts. And we all lived through it. But anyway, the one about the car, and this is not what I wrote about, was Herb and Pat were visiting us at our home in the woods in Pennsylvania. And we have like a driveway, an eighth of a mile long, and it has a lot of guardrails on it. They came and we had a good time. I don't know whether we drank too much or what, but anyway, they were leaving, and Dale and I are seeing how you go out and you greet, tell everybody goodbye. We're standing there, and all of a sudden we hear this hellacious crash, and then there was silence, and Dale says, gee, I think Herb must have had trouble on our driveway, but he, nothing occurred about it until the next day. We called each other, and Herb says, gee, Dale, I did wreck my car, but you fix your guardrails and I'll fix my car. So there you go. That's very typical of Herb. Oh my goodness, life is too short. Even though Herb was 90, we wish he was still with us. What memories the four of us, Herb and Pat, Dale and Cindy, made in our too short of time together. One memory out of many. We were mountain bicycling in the wilds of the Pennsylvania Allegheny State Forest. I can't hardly read my handwriting. Typically, Herb was the leader, mainly because he was always up front and bicycling hard and not looking back where we were going. And Pat, Dale, and Cindy were sticking together for not just for camaraderie, but trying to keep track of Herb. So anyway, the many forest woods trails were dirt, but good. We bicycled for quite some time and realized that we may be lost and spending the night in the woods. Can't read this. As luck would have it, we chanced upon a crew that was working on the Marcellus Shale with drilling site. Upon approaching them, we told them our predicament. A young worker with a four-wheel drive pickup truck volunteered to drive us out of the woods. We put our bikes in the truck and away we went, gleefully I might add, back to civilization. He reluctantly accepted a $50 finder's fee and a free pass to Rock City Park. Gail and I own Rock City Park, and I always have to give it a little, yeah. Look it up on our, yeah, we have a nice website, and come visit us. Anyway, for his troubles, we gave him that, and he reluctantly accepted it. What fun. Moral to this story, when having fun with Herb, be prepared for anything. Pat, this is for you. We sympathize with your loss, but you have family and friends to rely on. Dale and I are with you until we are 90.
Longer.
Or longer, yeah. All right.
I wrote a little thing for Herb's in my life, which I'm gonna have Cindy read, because today's not a good day for me to read that.
All right.
But I wanna tell you a little story. Herb and I grew up about a mile apart, and his home was on a little bluff overlooking Quaker State Refinery. And during the 1940s, Quaker State manufactured a specialty oil which they called Sterling motor oil. And around their refinery, they had a lot of signs advertising the Sterling product. So when Herb and my older brother Raphael and I would be out carousing, maybe, somebody said, "Where are you from?" Herb would respond, "Well, I live at Sterling Heights," so that kind of gives us a little bit of class.
Especially when you're from Farmers Valley. Yeah. All right, I'm going to read this. Dale and I are emotional people, and if we tear up, it's just the way we are. So we're gonna attempt to do this. Dale and I, and this is Dale's writing. I only read it because he said he could. Dale and I grew up in a little place called Farmers Valley, or Herb and I grew up in a little place called Farmers Valley in northwestern Pennsylvania. If you Google Farmers Valley and ask what is important about that place, Google would probably respond, two things: Quaker State Refinery and Herb Braden. I first met Herb as a boy while attending Troop 63 Boy Scout meetings with my older brother, who was nearer Herb's age and Herb's close friend. Our scoutmaster and his two assistants were Army GIs, just home from the war. These guys were patriots and they were serious. Meetings started with the Pledge of Allegiance and then turned to the Army's Dirty Dozen calisthenics. Early on, Herb was a great storyteller and on the cutting edge of all things political and musical. As the little brother, he coached me that it was not cool to be listening to Patsy Cline, but instead should be listening to Stan Getz, Ella Fitzgerald, and other such great jazz artists of the 40s, 50s, and 60s. On the political front, Herb would regale my brother and me with poignant and often hilarious lines from William F. Buckley's just released book, Up From Liberalism. In the little town of Smethport, about 5 miles from where we grew up, lived a winsome young beauty who garnered for herself a rather colorful reputation and went on to write a racy little book in which Herb was given, shall we say, honorable mention. I'm not sure, you might be able to get that book on the internet. Herb went off to the University of Cincinnati, and my brothers and I to Penn State, always to reunite during holiday vacations. Herb and my life somewhat paralleled in the next several years, in that Herb spent his military career in the 326th Army Band, and I, a few years after that, spent my military time in the 324th Army Band. Sometime after that, Herb and Pat were married. Herb's job career took them to Canada, where I think some of their children were born. During this time, he and Pat both became licensed pilots and owned their own plane. During that same period, I got my pilot's license, and Cindy and I had our own plane. All these things conspired to move me up from little brother status to being a true contemporary. Herb had a keen wit and many pithy quotable quotes, which I use to this day, always telling my audience, that's a Herbie Braden. Whether they know Herb or not, Herb was my teacher, my mentor, and mostly Herb was my friend. There you go.
Now time for the musical portion of this service. So as everyone said, you know, Herb, or as me and the grandkids all know him, Dags. I think, Maddie, you came up with that one.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks. Very, very unique. Yeah. So he was you know, a lot of people knew him for playing around the piano, but he was a legitimate, talented musician. I know he played French horn in the Army Band, and he also played upright bass. He would play jazz in officers' clubs, you know, back in the day, and he told me that once he got to play with Chet Baker, for who anyone knows, a very famous jazz musician, who became even more famous for singing. And Dax told me that whenever Chet would start to sing, him and all the band would tell him to shut up. So, you know, were it not for my grandfather telling Chet not to, it's possible that he would not have been, you know, the man he came to be. And so I know that one of his favorite songs was Have You Met Miss Jones? And his favorite cat also named Miss Jones. And that song and that cat became two of my favorites as well. So I'll play this now in honor of him.
Good afternoon. I can't tell you how incredibly honored I am to have been asked to speak here. I can't even tell you when I met her. It may have been during my first run for political office. It may have been when we protested a school teacher strike together in Annville, or it may have been sometime after the great legislative pay raise of Pennsylvania. But Herb always had something to say. And as Bill said earlier, it always ended with a big grin. And after hearing his family today, I understand why he kept doing it. Because you loved him for it. And even after Herb had first, once had dementia, he would want to tell me a story. And it was always, whenever he did, I would make sure that I would listen because I wanted to see the end. Because the end was always a punchline. The end was always a punchline for her. All through my political, I don't even want to call it a career, but through my time in politics, Herb would always have something to talk to me about. Whether it was whatever I was doing or a story from Bucks County when he tangled with the GOP establishment successfully. Or whether it was about flying, because we shared that love. I learned to fly right here in Palmyra, and we shared that love of flying. Or whether he talked to me about sailing, which I had no idea anything about sailing, but he would talk to me about it and I would listen. Because the story would always end with the big grin. I knew it was coming, I always knew it was coming. But the biggest grin of all that I would ever see from Herb was when he was talking about his family. He loved his family more than all those other things, whether it was music, which I also shared with him, or flying, or sailing, or politics, or his work. He loved his family more than anything else, and I could tell by the size of his grin when he would talk, because the grin wouldn't come at the end of the story, it would come at the beginning. And for that, you were all very blessed to know Herb a little bit better than I did. And in his short stay here between the eternities, I think that's probably the most important thing that we can take away, is who did we love and who loved us. And even though Herb has gone to the second eternity, he lives on here because he is very much alive in this room today and will be very much alive in every room that you're in, as long as you keep telling the stories with a big grin at the end. God bless you all. God bless you, Pat.
Good afternoon. I met Herb probably, I'm going to say 12, 15 years ago. I went to a class on the Constitution and Herb happened to be there, and we became friends from that point on. And it makes a lot of sense, all the stories I heard about Herb today from friends and family. Herb, obviously, growing up poor, what was amazing about Herb was I always considered myself, even though I grew up poor and I wasn't exposed to a whole lot in life as a child growing up, that Herb didn't care. I think everybody loved Herb because the way Herb loved you. He was one of the wittiest men I'll ever know. There was nothing you couldn't talk to Herb about. he wasn't interested in, well, he just, whatever you had on your mind, Herb would talk to you about it. And he could talk to you on a level where it was like the dude did it for a living, no matter what you talked about. I never met anyone, I've met a few people like Herb, but the wittiness and the sense of humor, he just could make you laugh under just about. I could be so mad, and if I got near Herb Braden, it all went away. He just had a way of taking your frustration away. And Pat, me and Herb were probably like brothers because we had one thing in common: we both married wonderful women. Pat Braden has been such an inspiration to me and such a friend. And as soon as I heard the word Pat, I prayed for you. I prayed for the whole family. This world isn't full of many Herb Bradens. And when you lose an icon like this, it really hurts. Herb has helped me in so many ways. And like in constitutional class, what was great about Herb was he gave you the impression that he was so smart it couldn't be measured, but you two could end up in timeout in an adult constitutional class. One time I had the pleasure of me and Herb plop down at the Bluebird back in the day before I stopped drinking, and me and Herb were gonna meet for lunch. And about 6 hours later, I still don't know to this day how Herb got home. I kind of know how I got home, but Herb just kept saying, I gotta get home, Pat's gonna be yelling at me. And after a while, it turned around from Herb being the guy that had to go to, we ain't going nowhere, partner. We're staying, and let's order another one. So, and if you'd be at Herb's house, I'd be out talking to Pat, whether I was loading firewood at the house or whatever, and you'd hear this piano roaring from the side or the back room there, and here it's Herb. I mean, the guy could play the piano like hardly anyone I've ever heard other than when I'm in church. And just to know that you had a friend like him, I'd see Herb and Pat quite a bit, and when you had an issue or a question or just a thought, and you laid it on Herb, he was right back at you with his own take on things, and you walked away with a totally different idea or heading down a different path. And it wasn't that your idea was wrong, it was that Herb had a different idea. And again, in my life, the good Lord has blessed me with so many icons in my life that were good men, and at the top of that list, top 5 in my life is Herb Braden. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. I appreciate the John 3:16 and the pamphlet there, because at the end of the day, he's now in a better place. He's no longer sick. He's still telling jokes. And he's now waiting on Pat to come and see him. And like I said, I can honestly tell you I'm a much better person, and I believe this world is a much better world because they had Herb and Pat Braden. Thank you.
Pat, I have to say, it's the best memorial service I've ever attended. And I don't think it's just the man that made it that way, but his family, and the stories that you have shared with us have captured Herb in ways that I don't think anyone else ever could, and you certainly had a unique friend in Herb Braden. And I'm the last thing between you and lunch, so I will try to make my 5 minutes very brief. When Pat asked me to speak today, she asked me if maybe I could bridge the gap between Ben Salem and his days here in Lebanon County. And I'm happy to do that. I had the privilege of meeting Herb about 45 years ago. I was getting ready to go to law school. I was a young guy interested in public policy and in politics, and I was told I should get down to Ben Salem and meet Herb Braden. Now, Herb was a supervisor in Ben Salem Township at that point, and we here in central Pennsylvania think of township supervisors as relatively minor officials. But Ben Salem Township, the city, of more than 60,000 people. That's bigger than Lancaster City or York City. It's about 2.5 times the size of Lebanon. So you get the impression that, Herb was a pretty big deal. And I still remember my first conversations with Herb, because the twinkle in his eye always preceded some of those usually terrible jokes, but sometimes pretty good ones. And we had great conversations. And the thing that struck me as I reflected on those conversations and what we did together, and I think we were always together except on one issue, and that was the pump. So we ended up on opposite sides that I just couldn't possibly bring myself to being with Abby Hoffman, but I think your dad was right. he stood with Abby in that protest. And as I walked through the hall across the way, getting ready to say my final goodbyes to Herb, those political buttons that were on the board, each one of them brought up a memory that was so poignant to me. And the one that really hit me was a guy that we had talked about, Herb and I, many times. It said, "Crazy for Cats." And Al Katz was a state representative like Russ Diamond from Northeast Philadelphia and adjacent Bucks County. And Al truly was crazy. And he reveled in that fact, and so he used that as his campaign mantra, "Crazy for Cats." And the favorite story that Herb and I would share was the time that Al went to a backyard party, dressed to the nines, because in those days you went to everything wearing a suit and tie. And he went to a backyard barbecue dressed in his suit and tie, and the woman that was hosting it said, "I will vote for you if you jump in that swimming pool." And Al didn't even hesitate. Walked off the edge of the pool, fully clothed, and we recollected on Al's life and legacy many times. But the thing that struck me so firmly, in the first twinkle in Herb's eye that I saw, which preceded one of those jokes, was his genuine friendship. And over today, I've heard that word. Reverend Marks said right away, he was a friend. Those who know him so long, Cindy said he was a friend. And Herb was a friend. And the period that bothers me about Herb and my friendship was that gap, Pat, between Bensalem and Lebanon County, because we kind of fell out of touch. There was never any falling out at all. On the contrary, I loved Herb and Pat then as much as I do now, but we didn't stay in touch. And so if, without a homily today, I can give just one thought as we celebrate the magnificent life of Herb Braden and think about life itself and what it means to all of us, don't let that happen. It's the only regret I have with Herb was that little period of time when we just weren't in touch. Look to the people to the left of you, the people to the right of you who are your friends, and make sure that you make the effort, take the time to stay in touch, to remain friends, to build those bonds that are so vitally important to human existence and to what we truly are as people. Don't be afraid to tell them you love them, because I did tell Herb that once. I don't think he liked it, but I did tell him. So, Herb came back to Central Pennsylvania. I had moved to Central Pennsylvania, and once again, our lives went like this, and that was such a blessing. He formed the Citizens Caucus. He had some tremendous debates and salons with folks, and he invited me over one time to speak on an issue where I wasn't honestly sure where he stood. And I thought, he asked me to come, I'm going to speak as firmly and convincingly as I can on my position. It was on the possibility of nominating and appointing statewide judges in Pennsylvania rather than electing them. And I thought it was very important that the people be allowed to elect their judges. And I was up against a woman who was very, very good in the art of debate on the other side. I think, Pat, that Herb got PCN to cover that day. He got a large crowd, as he always is able to do. And that was one of the times that marked the beginning of the magnificent relationship we enjoyed until the very end. Because we host a little policy briefing in our office once a month, and at the times when Herb was physically able, I don't think he ever missed. And he always asked the most penetrating questions. He always had the best thoughts. He always brought something out that nobody else in the room had seen fit to do. And I will say this, I can't recall ever seeing Herb without seeing Pat. And that says so much. It really does. Because Herb was a very, very proud veteran, as all of you know, and he will be laid to rest with full military honors, as he should be. And he expressed to me many times how proud he was of his service to our country. And he was a true patriot. the thing that I got from Herb when we first talked, the friendship that occurred between the two of us was in part because we shared a common enemy. And in politics, my enemy's enemies are my friends. But it went further than that. The garbage man that gave Herb so much trouble as the party chairman down there wasn't the reason that we were friends. The reason that we were friends was because of the soul and heart of Herb Braden. And so, in addition to being a true patriot who really, really deeply cared about his country, he was and always will be a great friend. And for that, I'm incredibly thankful, and I extend my condolences to the family on the loss of a great father, a great husband, a great grandfather, but most of all, a truly remarkable friend. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Reverend Mars for a benediction.
One thing I'd like to say is that I know Herb Braden a lot better now than I did an hour ago. I've heard it before and I believe it. If you want to find out a lot about a person, spend some time with their children and their friends and their grandchildren. Hope I didn't miss anybody. I'm going to ask that all of you who are able to stand, and we'll be dismissed. Now may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship and communion of the blessed Holy Spirit rest and abide with us now and forevermore. Amen.
Can I, just to close, you can sit down or stand, it doesn't matter. I just want to recognize two folks that couldn't make it here with us today. And the first is Commissioner Bill Ames. And I'm certain that Herbie and Bill are in heaven now, having a cold beer and having some political talk. And Colonel Frank Ryan sends his apologies that he couldn't make it, sends his apologies and condolences to the family. He is in the process of putting together a citation to the family, a citation of condolence from the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. So thank you everyone. There's a luncheon afterwards right down the hallway here. And also tomorrow morning at 8:30, there is a breakfast at Londonderry Village Pavilion, and that's open to everybody. Please attend both. And thank you everyone. This was fantastic. I never imagined a memorial service that was so inspiring and much fun, but it's fitting to the person, to Herbie. Thank you very much.